sitting in his hospital room so high up in the upper reaches of the building. When I walk the halls or sit in the room or wander to the waiting room to have a cigarette, it's a gradual turn of the earth outside the windows. The distant plains filled with buildings that have a look of fiction, because from this perspective they flatten out against one another, on into the distance, until there's thousands of windows, each one containing at least one human being that shows no signs of life. And it's all looking like small models of a train set against postcard-perfect reproductions of late winter skies and sunsets, yellow in the sparse clouds and miniature water tanks. And leaning against the glass of the window of his room, I can see dizzily down into the street. I wonder what it is to fall such distances. I'm afraid he's really dying. And when we brought him in here, it was just for some routine test because he wasn't pissing for days. The slightest movement of an arm or leg brought nausea. And he was expected to stay for only 2 or 3 days, but it's been a week now, and he barely opens his eyes for more than a few seconds. And I came into the room this morning, the door swinging open to pale light, and that steady figure outlining the sheets. And his breath was coming in rapid-fire bursts like a machine gun. I turn from the silence in the window and look at him, and an iris appears beneath one half-lifted eyelid, and its strength bores right through me. And I turn away almost embarrassed, having as much life in me as he hasn't. And the iris was the size of the room. It dwarfed the winter light filling the streets outside the window. It radiated across the heavy clouds with 50,000 windows reflecting the blue sky through it. Whales can descend to a depth of 5,000 feet where they can and must sustain a pressure of 140 tons on every square foot of their bodies. He seemed to wake for a moment and drifted soundlessly for a while, and then asked me in sounds that took 5 minutes to translate to help him into the nearby bathroom so that he could shit or something. And I manipulated the machinery and the structure of the bed so that his upper body rose towards me and his legs sank away. And I placed my hands beneath his back, it was hot and sweaty, and pulled him into a sitting position, and then took one paralyzed leg after the other, pulling him over the side of the bed. And then I realized he was going nowhere. He was limp and his eyes were closed and his mouth against my arm breathing wet sounds. And I felt my body thrumming with the sounds of vessels of blood and muscles contracting, the sounds of aging and of disintegration. The sound of something made ridiculous with language, the sense of loving and the sense of fear. I looked into his face. And the irises were expanding and filling the room. Curtains of eyelids shutting down over him to lift again and again. And I tried to explain he's too weak to make the trip 3 feet away to the bathroom. And I was suddenly scared and embarrassed again. I'm not strong enough, I said, tilting his head back. And the sounds of nurses and the hospital gurneys far away in the halls, but he said nothing. His dark eyes just staring and flickering back and forth from side to side in a strobic motion. Was he sleeping? Was he dreaming? What thoughts lay behind those eyes? What pictures forming? Do blind men have visual dreams? Do blind men have visual dreams? Dreams of color? Dreams of form? After giving birth, a female whale produces more than 200 gallons of milk a day. And looking out the windows, I can place myself somewhere out in that sky, lie down in that texture and dream of years and years of sleep. And I talk inside my head of change and of peace for this body beside me, of life for this body beside me, of belief in the unalterable positions and the shifting state of things, of disbelief, of disbelief and of need for something to suddenly and abruptly take place. This need for something to shift, like that last image of some Antonioni film where the young woman looks at the house her father built. Because of her gaze, it explodes not once but twice in slow motion. Huge fireballs of rupturing gas lines and couches and tables and chairs splintering into waves of shards and light and glass drifting in glittering helixes. And even the entire contents of the family refrigerator lovingly spilling out towards the eye in rage. Rage. A perfect rage I was beginning to understand. Seeing myself hovering in the atmosphere outside the building's walls. And wanting a shout to come from my throat. A shout that would level all the buildings, or else have a strength in my hands where I could rip open the earth like a cheap fabric and release a windscreen of lava and heat, or with the fist banging against my thighs create shockwaves that would cause all the manufacturers of the pre-invented world to go tumbling down in a slow and terrifying beauty till all the earth was level. Or maybe just to have some water poured from my head. If I had $1 to spend for healthcare. If I had $1 to spend for healthcare, I'd rather spend it on a baby or innocent person with some defect or illness not of their own responsibility, not some person with AIDS, says a healthcare official on national television. And this in the middle of an hour-long program of people dying on camera because they can't even afford the limited drugs available that might extend their lives. And I can't even remember what this official looked like because I reached in through the TV screen and ripped his face in half. Now, I was diagnosed with AIDS recently, and this is after the last few years of losing count of the friends and neighbors who've been dying slow, vicious, and unnecessary deaths because fags and dykes and junkies are expendable in this country. You want to stop AIDS? Shoot the queers, says the governor of Texas on the radio. And his press secretary later claims that the governor was only joking and didn't know the microphone was turned on. And besides, they didn't think it hurt his chances for re-elections anyways. And I wake up every morning, and I wake up every morning, and I wake up every morning in this killing machine called America. And I'm carrying this rage like a blood-filled egg. And there's a thin line between the inside and the outside, a thin line between thought and action. And that line is simply made up of blood and muscle and bone. And I'm waking up more and more from daydreams of tipping Amazonian blow darts and infected blood and spitting them at the exposed necklines of certain politicians or government healthcare officials or those thinly disguised walking swastikas that wear religious garments over their murderous intentions or those rabid strangers parading against AIDS clinics in a nightly news suburb. There's a thin line, a very thin line between the inside and the outside. And I've been looking all my life at the signs surround us, in the media or on people's lips. The religious types outside St. Patrick's Cathedral shouting to the men and women in the gay parade, "You won't be here next year, you'll get AIDS and die, ha ha!" And the areas of the USA where it's possible to murder a man, and when brought to trial, one only has to say that the victim was a queer and that he tried to touch you, and the courts will set you free. And the difficulties that a bunch of Republican senators have in Albany with supporting an anti-violence bill that includes sexual orientation as a category of crime victims. There's a thin line, a very thin line. As each T cell disappears from my body, it's replaced by 10 pounds of pressure, 10 pounds of rage. And I focus that rage into non-violent resistance, but the focus is starting to slip. The focus is starting to slip. My hands are beginning to move independent of self-restraint, and the egg is starting to crack. America, America, America seems to understand and accept murder as a self-defense against those who would murder other people. And it's been murder on a daily basis for 8, 9, 10, count them 10 long years. And we're expected to pay taxes to support this public and social murder. And we're expected to quietly and politely make house in this windstorm of murder. But I say there's certain politicians that better increase their security forces. And there's religious leaders and healthcare officials that are better get bigger fucking dogs and higher fences and more complex security alarms to their homes. And queer bastards better start doing their work from inside howitzer tanks, because the thin line between the inside and the outside
is beginning to erode. And at the moment, I'm a 37-foot tall, 1,172-pound man inside this 6-foot body. And all I can feel is the pressure. All I can feel is the pressure, the need for release. $5.